Welcome to the Bodcast Season 7, Episode 6. And today we are joined again by one of our favorite people in the fitness and nutrition industry, Tarryn Nettles. Tarryn, if you don't remember her from a previous episode we did last year with her, is an online coach with a focus on female health and hormones. So in this episode, Tarryn is going to take us through the signs and symptoms of hormonal imbalance. So Tarryn, welcome back and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I love connecting with you guys. You guys are a great group of people.
Yeah, I think, when did we pop? Was it in June?
Last week.
I can't.
A while.
Yeah, it was quite a while ago. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, that's a good one to start with. But we thought we've been talking a lot about hormones actually on here. And well, Tarryn, you know what the sort of struggles we face here in getting affordable testing done, which we're working on. But I thought this would be a great sort of intro topic for a lot of people, to think like, oh yeah, maybe I have got something going on, even before they think about testing. And so, yeah, without further ado, we can jump into that.
All right, I'm ready. I'm ready when you guys are. Do you guys want to go through the different hormonal scenarios and talk about each individual symptom? Is that how you guys want me to do it? Or
yeah, that would be great. Go through maybe the sex hormones and I guess thyroid and adrenals. We'll see if we can cover it all.
Trying to cover it all.
Yeah. Well, if it goes on too long, we can maybe get you back for a part 2.
Sure. Yeah, not a problem. So as I go through this, I mean, if you guys, have any questions or feedback, please, chime in, because I know once I get going with this, interrupt me. I don't mind. I won't take it personal by all means.
Perfect.
Okay, so the first one that I do want to talk about is estrogen dominance, because that's something that is in females specifically. And with estrogen dominance, this, there's 2 different forms, which is where there's just too much estrogen in the body. And then there's also relative estrogen dominance, where estrogen is high relative to progesterone. So basically think that progesterone is a little bit on the lower end. And some signs and symptoms for estrogen dominance is unexplained weight gain, or let's say a female has a hard time losing weight and she tends to hold weight, in the glutes, in the hips, in the stomach. Those can be the visual signs of estrogen dominance. Some other things are just fatigue, where, she just always is feeling fatigued. She has unstable moods where she, is just 1 minute she's okay, the next she's crying, the next she's angry, just very extremes in terms of the mood spectrums. Another one is irregular or painful menstrual cycles. That can definitely be a sign of estrogen dominance. And then again, like I said, a difficult time losing weight. So that's usually one of the key things, because with estrogen dominance, and this is going to take us into the signs and symptoms of poor thyroid function. With estrogen dominance, it can play into thyroid function because of what's going on within the liver and how the liver is being impacted by the estrogen dominance. Because when progesterone is low, we have to understand that the thyroid does have progesterone receptors on it. Thyroid has progesterone receptors on it. I just want to make sure I didn't say that backwards. Have metabolic properties to it, and it can help the thyroid. However, been on the lower side of things, what's happening within the liver, which is a main organ that plays into estrogen metabolism and just breaking it down and processing out of the body, or quote unquote, is that the liver is going to produce excess thyroid binding globulin, which is basically taking the free thyroid hormones and binding them. So think about like if they're bound, they cannot be used. So that can also contribute to lack of thyroid function, I should say. Now, some signs and symptoms here with function are constipation, even, menstrual cycle irregularities, excessive bloating, loose stools, always fatigued, difficulty sleeping, waking up in the middle of the night, you're always cold, you have a low AM temperature that's below, well, in the States, it's 97.6 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know what that converts to on the Celsius side of things here.
But that 35 or something, 35, like high 35s.
35. Okay, gotcha. I know it's frustrating with just like the dates, and you guys, like, even with hormone panels, like, I'm just like, can we all be unified? It would make life so much easier. But anyway, that's a different rant for another day. But
worse than that though is like they mix them, like in the same, like here they use the British system, but then like some are not. I don't know. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like, can we just straight across the board? Like, life would be easier that way. And I mean, Clea, like when we talk labs and stuff, I'm like, hold on, we got to convert this. And it's such a pain. But anyway, I'm not going to go down that rant here. And then also the other two things that are signs and symptoms of a lower thyroid is a lower resting pulse that's below 70 or 75 upon waking. And then, of course, and you're also going to have a hard time losing weight, or even have unexplained weight gain. Thyroid cannot keep up with the food that someone is consuming. So obviously, they can put on weight time trying to lose that. Now, the next one is low testosterone. So obviously, like low testosterone, low thyroid can obviously both play into males here, but I do like to focus a lot on, we have a lot more moving parts per month in terms of hormones. So it's really, I don't want to use the word or the term easy for us to fall into an imbalance, but let's say it's a little bit more common in females than males, just because of how our body responds to like a stress response, for example. And then of course, just again, the fluctuations of the hormones per month. But with low testosterone, and this can go like male to female, it can be poor body composition, loss of muscle strength, no recovery. So, after you have like a good training session, maybe you're finding that you're not recovering as well, or you're sore for, a week or something like that, or you feel like you've been hit by a bus after you train for a few days. You have a poor mood state. So low testosterone, and even some of these symptoms are going to tie into one another. Even with estrogen dominance and low testosterone, it can absolutely impact our thought process. A poor mood state, maybe we're just a little bit darker, or maybe we feel a little bit more, down, things like that. So estrogen dominance and low testosterone are both mental state as well. Another one is just lack of drive and motivation. Let's say someone who love to train, it's like their thing. They just love to do it. Like maybe they just, I don't want to train today, or they don't have the motivation to show up or the drive to do it anymore, or just anything that can definitely be a sign of the low testosterone. And then last but not least, low libido. So that's definitely a big red flag that there's something going on with testosterone in males and females. Now, the next one here is, well, first off, is there like any like questions or feedback you guys have? I just don't want to feel like I'm like taking this over here.
No, I like taking over.
Oh, you did?
I can just relax. I can just take notes. It's easy.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I know sometimes when I'm talking, I think I'm like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to like take this over. So okay, just wanted to check in on you guys. That's all. Okay, so the next one, last but not least here, is cortisol. So adrenal insufficiencies. Now, with the adrenals, these are the foundation of hormones, of hormone dysfunction, just because it does secrete cortisol. And then typically what we would see is when there is a thyroid dysfunction, there's probably also something going on with the adrenals, since they are on that same axis. And then not only that, with cortisol, if the adrenals are over secreting, it's going to pour onto, other systems. So obviously thyroid, sex hormones, and then also impact our gut. But with unhealthy cortisol patterns or adrenal insufficiencies, someone may experience chronic fatigue. They're tired but wired. They have really odd sleep patterns. Like, let's say they're waking up at night and they can't go back to sleep for like 2 to 3 hours, and they just lay there. That can be a sign that cortisol is spiking at night when it's not supposed to, because with the cortisol pattern, how it typically goes is it's based upon the circadian rhythm. So cortisol to melatonin. And upon waking, cortisol is supposed to spike because that's typically what wakes us up. And as the day goes on, so between the hours of 10 and 2 roughly, cortisol will start to decrease. And then obviously as the day goes on and we start moving into like the evening time, cortisol is a little bit on the lower end because melatonin's coming up and just preparing us to go to sleep. But when people are like, hey, I feel really tired, but I feel wired, I can't sleep, that's typically a sign that cortisol is also spiking before they go to bed. So they kind of have like that, I guess that fight or flight response, where they're just like, they're wired. But another thing here too, with a unhealthy cortisol and adrenal insufficiencies, is that you can be irritable, just really yourself, like you very moody, very irritable. That was something that I personally dealt with. Another thing is, poor blood glucose. That also plays into that because of just the cortisol response and just how those two things play into each other. And then lastly, the other thing is just cravings. Like, who have unhealthy cortisol patterns. Some people will crave sweets, like they just want sweets, like all the time, like extreme cravings of sweets. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you'll have the individuals where they crave salty, like they just want like salty foods. So if there's extreme cravings, I'm not talking about like, oh man, like I want a candy bar, or oh, I just want a bag of chips, that sounds good. Like I'm saying, like it's shit enough. That can also be a sign and symptom that, there is something going on with cortisol. And and the adrenals. So again, like some of those symptoms, like they kind of play into one another. They do have overlapping symptoms, but that's why it's a good thing where if you find you have these symptoms, you know, if you can, I would recommend to check, not guess, because that's going to be your, you know, your validation of like, yes, this is in fact going on. However, you know, if you don't have you guys, it is difficult for, you know, people over there to get labs done or get all the labs ran to kind of piece it all together. You can just really go off of signs and symptoms, and you know, you can kind of treat things based upon the symptoms that one is experiencing. Pretty much covered everything. I just ran through it.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, from like working with you, Tarryn, it's, you know, we all our clients do track their cycle, and you can start picking these things up. Like I think even before I started working with you, like I could see that something was not quite right with some clients, you know, if they were maybe in a fat loss phase and like nothing is working, you know, you don't want calories to go lower, they're already quite low, they're doing cardio, you know that they're being adherent and like nothing's happening. And then you look to their cycle and you're like, okay, well, this, there's something going on here. And I think that's why it is so important to start with tracking your cycle so that you can, you know, see if you've got any of these kind of signs and symptoms, because if you don't, what do you know what your normal is?
Exactly. Yeah. And for females, it's really like the cycle is like that's your monthly report card. Everything's good, or hey, something isn't right. Like, you know, you're experiencing like painful cramps, or just a really heavy menstrual cycle that month, or you know, let's say, you know, you have a female complaining of like, oh man, like I have, you know, extreme like breast tenderness or soreness, you know, that's also a sign that estrogen is going a little bit higher, and that there may be some estrogen dominance, you know, going on, you know, with that as well. Or like anxiety tends to pick up too, like around certain parts of the cycle. You know, that can be progesterone isn't coming up to where it needs to be. And then the same thing with anxiety too, that also plays in as well. So, you know, there's a lot of overlap, but for females, like the biggest indicator is women should track their cycle, because it's their bill of health. You know, you need to know, am I, you know, because that can, it dictates so much, you know, it can play into your progress, play into your quality of life, you know, because that's what's important, because life's too short to be walking around feeling like death, feeling terrible all the time.
It's quite crazy. I guess it how do I put it? Like I remember in high school when doing biology, all these symptoms that you're saying red flags were considered symptoms of, like, you know, when females are in their cycle. So during the time of the month in class, you'd have girls in pain and, you know, just suffering. And since it's what we were taught, you know, it's like time of the month, this happens, I think it's normalized too early, because you'd see the girl suffering and you're like, oh, and, you know, your boys were teenagers and you're like, oh, time of the month.
See, I agree with you, except I'm older. So with being older, we didn't talk about it. But I know from girls that were in my, say, house group when I was at school, in my class, a lot of them used to have painful periods and would just put straight on birth control. They're like quite a young age, like we're talking 14, 15, you know, as soon as they had like severe period cramps, and they were put on birth control.
It's normalized too early.
Yeah, that like the the birth control thing, like, I'm just like, ugh. Do I want to go down this rabbit hole?
Yeah, because it started as a band-aid way too early in high school. It's like it's normalized way too early. It's not right, I think.
Exactly. And it's like, with the menstrual cycle, there can be some discomfort that is normal. It comes with it, but when those things are taken to extreme, it's not normal. So it's like we need to get down to, well, why are we experiencing this? Not like, here's some birth control or hormonal birth control. And then now we're only making matters worse, because hormonal birth control, it does cause a female to go estrogen dominant, because we have to remember what birth control does. So it stops the cycle. Well, depending on what you're on, because there are different forms of birth control. But typically with hormonal birth control, it stops the ovulation. And around ovulation, that's when that's when testosterone increases. That's when it hits that peak. And we need that ovulation to happen for secretion of progesterone. And that's what causes the peak of progesterone within that luteal phase. But when we're suppressing that, the only thing we have is estrogen. And it's just like, you're making matters worse, because like you said, Leon, it's a Band-Aid. It's not solving anything.
It was the answer to every girl's problem.
Just plaster over the crack. But I was going to say, but even as creeping into bodybuilding, because I've heard of coaches who get women to go on birth control, so we don't have to deal with an actual period and ovulation. And I've heard of this. I don't know any coaches that do it, but I've heard of, from female competitors, some coaches prefer them being on birth control just to stop the cycle, because it's just constant throughout prep.
That's horrendous.
Yeah,
it is horrendous.
That's the worst advice I've ever heard. I know I've heard of, before I was talking to a gal on Instagram, and our coaching team recommended that females should get on birth control. They stopped bleeding because they got too lean, and the recommendation was get on birth control. It will cause you to have a cycle. And I'm like, what? It's just the information out there. It's so bad for females, because it's like, look, our hormones are supposed to fluctuate each month. Like that's just what we were made to do. And that's the whole reason why we're all alive, is because of, hormone fluctuations. It allowed our mothers to get pregnant with us and give birth. But when we're being told, like, you don't need to bleed, or this will help you bleed, it's just like, I feel so bad for females. Like, there's just so much misinformation out there. And it's just like, look, I can't help that we our hormones fluctuate each month. Like, that's just how we were made. But it's just like, people like, it's not normal. And I'm like, what? It's so normal.
It was very normal. But it's a bit like, and you're right, a female's menstrual cycle. I do encourage all my clients to tell me about their cycle. You probably think I'm well weird, but I do encourage it. But we were talking the other day. I took on a client who was in prep. She'd been in prep for 5 weeks with another coach. I took her over halfway, but to the point where she was going to hospital because her period cramps were so bad, she had to go to hospital to get relief. And so first thing I did was stick on immediately onto a deload, get some carbs in you, have 48 hours of refeed, and let's see where you are after 48 hours. And she did feel better, but we haven't had that since. But it's just insane. with detail. Yeah, you can generally tell a woman's overall health from a regular cycle or irregular.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's, I mean,
yeah, that's insane. Like if
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Clea. No, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I think we were talking about that kind as well. She was on some insanely low calories, and
mental.
But it's also, as a woman, to me, it just seems normal that you'd want to figure out, like, know about your cycle, like understand it, like just the basics. And, because from there, then you can be like, okay, well, this is really weird, or this, this is not going to work for me, or if you are working with a coach, you'll be like, okay, that doesn't sound very good, because there is so much good information out there as well. And I think it's just like with hormonal birth control, is you just generally want to trust your doctor, and if they're telling you like this is going to help you, you'll be like, okay, well, I want to believe you. Or even with a coach, if they're telling you something, you're like, well, I kind of think you've got my best interest in heart, which is not always the case.
Should have best interest.
Yeah. So
that's our best interest.
But they don't. So I think it's really up to you as the client, or just you to just take it upon yourself to learn those basics as well, so that you can, you're in charge of your health. And I think there is enough good information out there that you can do that, to sort of stop you getting into these kind of awful situations where, like that lady was on her 700 calories.
Oh, it's terrible. Also, 2 hours of cardio, 700 calories.
Oh, jeez. That's horrible.
Sorry, I was just wondering, like it's a bit random, but in the States, is it like, say, high school, uni, or just normally, do people generally talk about, women's cycle, I guess, hormonal health? Because I guess for certain males, certain age, because even for me, when I started coaching at some point, as I had to sit and think, how do I start asking this female about her cycle? Where, what angle do I approach it with? Because it wasn't really normal.
Well,
but now, now I know how to approach it, and we talk. But before, even because we'd sit in the gym and some of the trainers and that we'd actually be like, so how it's like a men's conference on how to ask. And it's just because it's new. No one, even the females themselves, don't really talk about it because it's a bit taboo. And also I remember, like, when my dad would go and buy for my sister, like the tampons and stuff, and you could really see like
sweating,
like it's the aisle of death. He'd look at it and it's like, oh and it's just that I
the aisle of a supermarket.
Yeah, because he'd be like, me or my brother, and be like, yo,
you go.
Ask her which one, So I don't know how the conversation is, say, in the US as in comparison. Yeah.
I mean, in like the school system, like when I was in school, like, like elementary, or not even elementary, but I think like more so middle school is when like they bring up the idea of the talk, like the sex talk. Yeah. I don't think they've ever really covered the menstrual cycle. I don't really think they educated us much at all, besides like, this is a male genital, this is a female genital. And it's just like, it was never like a female has a menstrual, a male does not. And I think even at like a college, university level, I think it's really just dependent upon what did you go to school for. So, obviously, like, biology, like you'll learn about, okay, the different physiologies of, male to female. And learn about, I know in my A&P, we learned about, you know, the different phases of the menstrual cycle and what hormones are released. And for males, like the sperm production, and, you know, it all starts with like the pituitary with that, but never in depth in terms of just like imbalances or, you know, things like that, which now that I'm saying that, I'm like, that's kind of sad. Like, we're not taught about how things can go wrong in the body, just, or like, this isn't normal for a female. Like, it's just,
yeah.
I think I just blew my mind a little bit. Like,
yeah,
wow.
I think that's the important bit actually for girls who start their periods, what's normal and what's not from day one, because people just think, you know, we just get used to having painful period cramps, you know, terrible PMS, you know, and we don't realise actually it's probably not how it's meant to be. You know, you're not meant to be like, so you can't touch your breast because it's too tender or whatever it may be, you know. And the other thing is, like, I deal with clients, is, you know, we panic and go, oh, my weight shot up this week. I'm like, okay, let's try and work out what's happening with your cycle before we panic. It's not just going to be water retention or stress. It's discussed, you know, so.
Yeah. And that's why, like, for males, like, for mine and you, Andy, it's like, you know, we, like, you have to normalize, you know, asking a female about her cycle. And a female, in my opinion, like, at least adult females, you know, they should feel comfortable discussing this with their coach, you know, even if their coach is a male, because this is it, like, their data and tracking their cycle, it can tell you a lot of things, a lot of different things. So, you know, like you said, Andy, like with, you know, your female client, well, where are you at in your cycle? You know, are you around ovulation? Because you can have fluid, you know, the scale can creep up a few pounds, but then after ovulation, it goes back down. She gets closer to starting. Same thing, you know, she can hold on to some fluid retention because progesterone is peaking. But then once she hits her cycle, it's just like her weight will drop because she drops the fluid. So, you know, if, like, it's important, I think, for all coaches to track a female cycle and just know, you know, where she's at. Because even with my female clients, what I do is I do like to track where they're at in their cycle, or look at, okay, follicular phase, which is always day one of the menstrual, you know, that lasts at least 14 days. And then I know on like the 14th, 15th day mark, we're entering into ovulation, you know, and ovulation doesn't necessarily happen the same day every month. So it's kind of like, for a few days, we may start seeing like the data or the weight kind of creep up a little bit, but we need to know, like, okay, she's in that ovulation window. And then obviously, which is again another 14 days, you know, give or take. Every female's different, but I like days, even though some females are, you know, maybe 29 or 30, you know, it's like there's no right or wrong, like, in terms of, like, you know, is she 28 or is she a 30-day cycle? You know, as long as, like, there is a cycle and it's not extremely short cycle, you know, just her, like a normal cycling female without like the red flags of it's coming too soon, it's coming twice a month, or it's not coming at all, then obviously there's an issue there.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also, like, with young girls, like, it's quite normal when you start your cycle for it to be a bit irregular or, you know, heavy, and that just seems, it's so ironic, isn't it? Because that's normal when you're younger, and then girls are like, oh, but this is not normal, and then go to the doctor who's like, I have the pill to cure that. And it's, I guess, the same, you know, on the, you know, if you're going through like perimenopause, it's just, you can have irregular cycles then as well. So I think just having that kind of knowledge about like your different sort of phases in your life, what is normal or not there as well is kind of useful to know.
Exactly. Young girl who, like, let's say she just started her cycle, you know, like you said, Clea, like, it's not going to be like a regular cycle. It may be sporadic, it may be very short, you know. It's one of these things where it's kind of like, you know, your menstrual cycle in age. So obviously, you know, the more mature that age of the cycle is, the more regular it should be, you know. And for the younger kids, like teenagers or preteens or whatever they call them nowadays, you know, that, you know, it's normal for them not to be regular, you know, because their cycle isn't matured yet for it to be a regular cycle. And putting these like teenagers on hormonal birth control, like, it's like you're really like, you're taking away from that girl's physiology, because you've got to give her body time to mature within the cycle to let her have a quote unquote mature cycle or regular cycle.
Yeah. So like in your experience, what's the most common imbalance that you deal with?
So estrogen dominance is definitely one of the most common. Lower thyroid is one, and then like those are like the three things that I typically see, you know, in females that I come across me and reach out to me.
So you cut off for the third one. So we've got estrogen dominance, low thyroid.
Oh,
sorry, it's our internet.
Okay, no, it's okay. So I said estrogen, then poor thyroid function, and then low testosterone.
Low testosterone.
Those are the those
Yeah.
are the three common ones that I see.
Yeah. And I guess like the lifestyle that a lot of women lead nowadays kind of plays into that. Would you think?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's, you know, it's one of these things with what people don't understand, like when it comes to hormone imbalances or hormone dysfunction. I mean, this may sound very mean, but it's the truth. It's like, if you experience a hormone imbalance, it's because it's brought on by your life decisions. Your lifestyle is what creates the imbalances, you know, especially for women. Like, we see a lot of women. I believe I was looking at some stats the other day, and every 1 in 5 females have some form of thyroid dysfunction. And I was like, wow.
That's a lot.
But again, yeah, but think about like females, like what your typical female does. You know, they're always trying to diet. There's a crash diet. There's this diet their girlfriend started, so they're doing it too. Or, hey, let's go do CrossFit. You know, let's kill ourselves and do it 5-6 days a week and not recover. You know, all of these things are a contributing factor, because a lot of it comes from just the chronic buildup of stress. You know, like with cortisol is not a bad hormone. I know it gets a really bad rep. It's not a bad hormone. We need it to live. But the issue is when when the adrenals lose resiliency, and the next thing you know, it's like cortisol's low. Like, it's a normal thing for a lot of individuals. You know, all of that stuff's it's brought on through not managing the cortisol and just letting it just continuously build up. And it's kind of funny, like, since we're on the topic of cortisol, is I actually had a conversation with one of my clients the other day, and it was kind of like a mind blow moment for me, where she was like, well, I don't really understand. And I think that stress is just something like, oh, hey, I got a divorce, or hey, I'm injured, or hey, something happened in my life. And it's just more of a mental stress. But it's like, stress is far more than just mental. It's, you know, it's putting ourselves in a caloric deficit. That is a stress. Plus, energy output, or, less calories in, more calories out. Those things are stressors. And if you're chronically living that life, or chronically dieting, working out, killing the cardio, not getting enough sleep, you're setting yourself up to, it will catch up with you.
That's the thing, is like I always say to clients, if you're not getting enough sleep, let's cut back on the training, because there's no point compounding the fact that you're not getting any sleep with then having to try and bust your ass at the gym, because you just add more stress. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's like a stress on top of a stress on top of a stress. And it's like, well, if you're not doing like something simple as sleep, then yeah, we got to remove something, to make up for that. I mean, you definitely want to encourage the sleep, for sure. But and I know you do, but it's just like people, I guess it's like, it's not like I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth, but it's not like a trade-off, but it kind of is a trade-off. Like I see like both sides of like what you're saying with that.
Yeah, it's a case of like, there's no point compounding when you're already stressed. So, for instance, people got a very stressful life at the moment, so they're not sleeping, then trying to be in a calorie deficit, get all their training sessions in. Something's got to give. And, what do we have most control over? Which is our output. That's the thing we can control most of all, apart from obviously, calories in. Because, a lot of the time sleep, we can put things in place to sleep, but when you're chronically stressed, it can be a little bit out of reach, a little bit. So let's start controlling the factors we can control to optimize the other bits.
But not when your favorite influencer says sleep is for the weak, man.
Yeah, no days off. No days off. Beast mode.
Well, no. I think women are the worst, because like we want to do it all, and then there's other people saying like, oh, women have better recovery, and I guess some do, perhaps. I found like I've tried to train 5 days a week, I just can't recover, it doesn't work for me. But that's all put out there, and I must say most of the women I see on IG do 5 to 6 days a week, and that's just kind of the norm. And then you're supposed to be a wife, you're supposed to be this, you're supposed to work as well, and yeah, like you said, Tarryn, your girlfriend's doing this diet, and they're like, oh yeah, or hubby's doing keto, and they're like, okay, well I'll just join him. And it's like, we are very different, and I think for women the hardest thing ever is to pull back.
It's the other thing. It's beyond that. Is like I had one of my clients this week. Her kids were really ill. So she's looking after them, and she's messaging me going, I'm really sorry I haven't checked in. She's getting really panicked about not checking in. I was like, don't even worry about the check-in. Sort your kids out. Sort yourself out.
I know.
And check in later in the week when you're settled and it's relaxed. She's getting stressed about not checking in. I was like, I don't want to be an extra stress on top of all your other stress. Don't worry about me. We can get to that,
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, even with if with client check-ins, it's like one of those things where it's like, look, this should be a stress relief for you, not like, oh my gosh, and just, the world is crumbling around them, like with a check-in. And like, you look like the client looks forward to, because you're kind of giving them like that peace of mind, or giving him, we need to calm down. Like, it's going to be okay. Because for some clients, it's like one of these things where it's like, our minds are our biggest enemy, where it's like the problem in our mind is like this big, but then it's like when you tell like your coach about it, or someone else about it, it's like in all actuality the problem is really only this big.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's why I was like, calm down, like check in with your coach, because they can make that problem that you think is this big, be that big for you.
Yeah, you did such a great post, I think it was yesterday, like just get the basics right first. And we're all, I think we all always just say that, because you know, if you get those right, it has a, you know, if you can work on your cortisol, you can work on your sleep, you know, it has positive knock-on effects, you know, to whatever imbalance that you might think you have. So can you take us through your basics? Like, even if someone thinks they've got an imbalance, like, first of all, what basics would you put in place? And then if they still think they have it, I guess, you know, if they can test, but have you got any other sort of protocols sort of beyond the basics that you would suggest?
So well, first off, I guess, like, let's address, like, what are the basics? Again, kind of like a hard truth here. It's like one of these things where it's like, sometimes you have those individuals where it's like, they can't even be consistent, you know, following a diet. They don't prioritize movement, exercise. They're just like a stress ball. Like, they can't manage the stress, or they're not having a daily bowel movement. You know, you need to tackle those and master that first before, like, you can do anything else. And I find, like, people who maybe they don't have that stuff mastered, you know, they want to point their finger at, well, I have a hormone imbalance. I know it because I'm not losing weight. And it's like, no, honey, you're just not consistent in what you're doing, and you're stressing out and all of these other things. So, you know, if I have someone that comes to me and they're like, hey, I think I have a hormone issue. Well, it's like 99% of the time, or let's say like 90% of the time, you know, they will have labs. So it's like, I can validate, like, yes, there's something going on, or no, there's not, you're just not consistent. But most of my people, like, who come to me, like, with hormonal issues, like, they genuinely do understand that they have an issue. Or just like, hey, I can't lose weight. Like, I think there's something going on with my thyroid, this or that. You know, I ask these questions. Well, how's your diet? You know, what have you been doing? You know, how's your sleep? How's this? How's that? And there's always is missing. And it's like, we have to work on that first, you know, before hormone issue, because sometimes there isn't. It's just their lack of adherence, and they don't want to take the blame, so it's like they got to point it, you know, to something else. So that's the problem. Like, it's not me, it's there's something going on inside of me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think because there's a lot more information now out on social media, which is great, but also people do look for it as an excuse. And sometimes, you know, I've had people come to me and say, yeah, well, you know, I'm struggling to lose weight. I think it could be my hormones. It could be this, that, the other. I'm like, well,
it's never them.
Like, realistically, you know, for a period of time, not just a week, because people are like, oh yeah, I was really consistent last week. I was like, well done. You know, it's like last week. What about for 2 months, 3 months? You know, because, and that's the reality. It's like, I always say, it's like a snowball. You start rolling small, and for a while it's small, and it starts getting bigger, and then it gets even bigger quite quickly after that, because, you know, you're rolling and you're doing the basics really simply. Then, if you've got a problem, of ticking off all those small boxes, then if things, you know, are showing not improving, or you're actually feeling ill, you know, feeling worse, or we're noticing things like, you know, problems with your menstrual cycle, problems in your bowel movement, lack of sleep, then we can start, you know, investigating what could be the cause. But you can't do that until you've been consistent, you know, for a period of time, because, you know, what you're measuring.
Exactly. And just like just to kind of take that like another way here, because I have come across people like this, like more specifically females, where, you know, they are very, very consistent, like almost like obsessively consistent. Yeah. But the problem is that you're consistent on the wrong things. You know, you're cutting out the carbs, or you know, you're overdoing you're excessively training high energy output, and then they kind of hit a wall, and then they're like, it's my hormones. I know it. But it's like, it's not that it's not the hormones, it is the hormones that's kind of causing you to stall out, but it's just it's just the fact that you're overstressing the body. And of course, for a female, when you overstress the body is going to stop responding because of, women are metabolic adaptation machines. Like, we will downregulate like that if, we're not managing or balancing, recovery cortisol. So I find that's something that's common too. Or they're just excessively just stressing, or just, those clients who just obsess so much that it becomes a stress, and you're like, you're stopping the progress because you're stressing.
Well, that's the thing I always say to people. There's no point trying to be fit and do all this training if you actually don't enjoy it. If it's not making your life better, why do it? It's not, because there's better ways to enjoy yourself if you absolutely hate going to the gym, or you absolutely hate, being consistent or feeling your best. If you hate something, joy, because actually the extra dopamine is probably more beneficial than the extra cortisol you're giving yourself right now.
Yeah. I mean, and even for some people, like for like the people who like, oh, I hate training and it's just like a stressor to them, like just mentally, it's like, well, take a break from it. Like, it's okay, like, not to lift weights, like get out and walk, it's going to benefit you, and come back when you're ready.
And this is what I say about holidays. Whenever clients go on holiday, I say, you don't have to train. Do as much or as little as you want on training. If, for your mental health, training really helps you, you're going to really enjoy your holiday and do a bit of training, great. But otherwise, just spend time with the kids, get in a pool with your kids, swim around, walk on the beach. These little things that you will enjoy doing will have way more benefit than spending an hour every day in the hotel gym.
Yeah, exactly. And Clea, I know you know who this person is, but Lyle McDonald, and Leon, you may know as well too. With Lyle McDonald, it was a book I recommended.
Yes.
To see the women's book, volume 1.
Yeah.
Love Lyle McDonald. Like, I remember listening to one of his podcasts, and he was saying too, like, for women specifically who are stressing out, or they hit this making progress, like what he recommends, and I know this sounds like super crazy. I mean, I wouldn't go this route, but I get it. I tell women is, if you're not making progress, with your caloric deficit, smoke weed, have sex, eat food. And he's like, that'll do the job.
Oh, that's so good. That's amazing.
Yeah, but it's all things to make you calm down and make you happy.
Have you ever noticed, right, if you can't sleep, you're struggling to sleep, if you have sex, and it's banging sex, it's great, you pass out straight away after. Everyone's asleep within a short while after. Brilliant.
Calm down immediately.
Popular podcast yet.
Dopamine hits, oxytocin hits, you get some sleep in.
Yeah. That'd be such a great post, wouldn't it?
I know.
The 3 things you can do to get more progress.
Yeah, and not only that, it's just like when you can just bring the stress down, and actually be surprised on, like, the scale will drop, because like when I was listening to that podcast, like Lyle McDonald said, like, he would legit of his, like, he doesn't take on clients, but he's recommended that, and some people follow that. And when he recommended that to, like, some of these females, like, the next thing you know, they went from not losing weight at all to, like, boom, they dropped like 3 to 5 pounds because the stress is gone.
You find that though. You find that when you send a client goes on holiday, and you say, eat what you want within reason, don't go mental, but eat what you want, enjoy yourself, be active. And we can't believe if they lose weight during holiday. It's like, well, because you've been so stressed getting up to holiday.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's, if you are listening to this and you think you do have a hormonal imbalance, you've got to be very honest and look at your life and being like, Tarryn, as you said, oh, you've cut out carbs, or you're doing really low carb, look at your training. If you're doing CrossFit 5 times a week, or if you're doing sort of normal bodybuilding type training, but you're doing a lot of HIIT, you're going to have to pull that back, because being in a deficit and that training are stresses on your body. So, you could just pull those back for a while and see if that helps you. And then I guess, we can get tests done here. So this might be just a good place to kind of wrap up, Tarryn. Like, what I know you have specific labs that you like run, and like of the labs that I've seen run here, they are basic. And I guess, people don't know what to ask for, because the few ones I've seen, I think I've sent you a few, you're like, well, this is not showing me anything. Like, I cannot help you with that, so could you just run through quickly kind of the labs that you like run? And then, we'll also write that in the show notes for anyone listening.
Sure.
Do we write show notes? Do that?
I don't know what else to call them.
So when it comes to females versus males getting panels done, the biggest thing for a female is the timing. She wants to get her panels ran on day 21 of the menstrual, because that's when progesterone is supposed to peak. And that can also give you an idea of, well, how high progesterone's going. Is there estrogen dominance going on in terms of relative estrogen dominance, or even frame, but that's just really to be dependent upon the estrogen within itself. But in terms of labs, so with sex hormones, you want to get done estrone, progesterone, free testosterone, total testosterone. I think that's all for sex hormones. You kind of put me on this. But also too, like for males, some other things that, they can get ran to add into that would be, DHT, because obviously that's, important in terms of how testosterone's converting, especially if you have a male that, like, let's say is on, some like TRT, like testosterone therapy, like that's important to look at there too. Now, in terms of thyroid hormones, it would be TSH, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, TPO, and TGAB. And then just like some miscellaneous health markers, like, because there are some things within the health markers that also can tell us, like, okay, we need to, things like that. But a complete metabolic panel would be good, because that's going to cover things like AST, ALT. Those are the liver enzymes that you want to look at that can tell us how the pathways of the liver are functioning. Another thing is a complete blood count, or CBC. It just is showing us, just like different types of blood cells and things like that. Those are good to look at. And then typically, if you see something that's off within the CBC, I always typically I refer them out to a doctor, just because it's like, that's out of my scope. I can't really do anything. Like, we can look into it, but I don't do anything. The other miscellaneous ones would be vitamin D. Of course, that's a really important marker to have. Cortisol, a lipid panel would be important to get ran. And then let's see, lipid, cortisol, and then insulin, another good one to look at. So that's your complete panel. And you want to try to get all of them done together, instead of just like, oh, I just want to get thyroid done, or, oh, I just want to get sex hormones done, because they all intertwine with one another, because our bodies, they don't work independent of each other. So if someone's having, check your sex hormones, because if a woman's estrogen dominant, it can cause thyroid to downregulate. So rather than just looking at thyroid and like, here, take thyroid med, and maybe it's not helping, or something's going on, you haven't really looked at the bigger picture to figure out, well, what's the root cause of what's going on?
Yeah, I would say for Kenya, Yeah, because I know the blood panels I get done when I'm in the UK costs like £200, so it's about $300-ish. In Kenya, the same blood panels cost $500.
More.
Right, so and that's like everything. So I get, Dr. Dean looks at the bloods. But I would say my advice to people in Kenya is if you can get some of those tests on your medical insurance, do that. Get the ones on your medical insurance, tick them off which ones you can do, and at the same time, pay privately to have the other ones. So you're actually only paying them for, say, half the tests, and the other half you're pushing onto insurance. That way, it will save you a bit of money.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
I'm having a meeting tomorrow actually with a company that comes to your house and takes your blood.
Nice.
They do everything that you ask for, Tarryn. They have to send reverse T3 and DHT to South Africa. They can't test that here. But it's, and I'm going to talk with them because they work with some local insurance companies, which would be great. I don't think many insurance companies cover sex hormones. I think they cover like your blood count, they'll cover thyroid, lipid panel, they'll cover that, but the sex hormones, they won't. But like Andy said, you can pay out of pocket for those, and that's not going to beggar you. So that would be really awesome.
Yeah,
we can do that here because
there is a company that was going to do all my bloods. I mean, took all my bloods. Funny story. I don't know what she did. She hit the vein and it ended up spraying blood everywhere. And she had to take blood out the other wrist. I was like, I do it when I take my own bloods. I do it better than this, and I do it left-handed. I'm right-handed. I'm still better than you. The blood's off to South Africa, and on the way we got somehow destroyed. And they had to take back the money.
Oh,
what's the point of doing that? It's like so annoying. That's when I was in prep as well. So it's stupid. They paid me back, luckily, but I was like, it's just the fact that you put pins in me and I couldn't even get the results. What's the point of that?
That's really terrible. Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to trial ourselves first with this company and see if the blood makes it to South Africa. Because I think, they sound really good. They work with them, Lancet. So I think the more I've had sessions with you, Tarryn, it's like you really need that. You need that blood work in front of you to actually to help someone. Like you can look at the signs and symptoms, but it could be so many things. You don't know exactly what it is. I mean, you can still help, of course, but having that blood work done, I think it just.
As we discussed before, you can find stuff you didn't know and you weren't even looking for. A bit like when I first started doing my bloods, I found a hereditary blood glucose issue. I ended up doing a DNA test and find out I've got a hereditary blood glucose issue. But as I found, because Dr. Dean was looking at my full blood panels, he goes, "Oh, there's something wrong with your T3 cells or whatever it was, because this is happening, that's happening, which is affecting your SHBG levels, And then we work back from high SHBG, sort of and then we work back to that eventually.
And that's another thing to add to the list too, is SHBG. Oh, that's right. Okay, because that's something that you don't typically see on panels, but it tells you a lot of like what's binding. Is like it's either going to be like estrogen or testosterone is the ones that are either bound or unbound. So that would be another one to add to the hormone panel list.
Yeah, I can't remember if they do SHGB. I'll have to check with them. I think
they often do it. Like for men, they will usually do it because I don't know so much for women, because with men it's important to work out your free test from your total test, because then you compare that to SHBG. So in men's panels, SHBG is usually in women's panels, I'm not sure, to be honest. It's ideal to have it there, but I don't know if they do.
Well, I think like for I mean, it's good to look at it. I mean, if you have a woman who's on HRT, who's on, testosterone, like for example, like I'm on hormone replacement therapy for testosterone, and but for SHBG, for like a female who, let's say she's not on, hormone replacement therapy or any kind of therapeutic, things like that, it's still important, I think, to look at SHBG, because if she has low free testosterone, you can look at that and you can be like, okay, I see why. It's because a lot of the free test is bound, or there's more estrogen that isn't bound, that's maybe driving up, her estradiol, or, estrone, or, things like that. So I think it's genders, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we have listeners, I think, in the States as well. And I know you use, is it Life Extension in the States?
Mm-hmm. Yes, Life Extension.
Okay, so we'll put that in the show notes too.
I'm actually I'm in the process of working with a company called Evexia, and the cool thing is with them, like it's here in the States. Like I don't know if like you guys, what it is basically, it's like, I'm cherry picking the labs that I run. And we just go through that company, and they, the clients pay, sending them the bill because I'm paying for it, or, they pay for it and they're charged like an extra 5%. The beauty of it is like, I can pick exactly what labs like I want to look at, and then, write it off, and then send it off to them, and they take it to a lab court over here and get blood drawn, and there we go. So I can look at specific things based upon, what may be going on with them, or things that I want to see if they improved or not.
That's amazing.
Oh, wow. That's good.
Yeah. Well, I hope.
And that's like what I told you, Clea. I was like, man, if I was super rich, I would create something where it's like, it's international in terms of like, everybody has access to this, because it's important for all human beings, to get blood work done. I mean, fitness, or if you're not, you're still a human being, and everyone needs to have that kind of access. So if I ever hit the lottery one day and I become a multimillionaire or a billionaire, I'm creating just that. And I'm putting it nationwide.
Yeah, it's on Shark Tank. Here we go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, it would be so great, wouldn't it? Like, it should just be a standard thing. Because I mean, I think, Leon, you sent some of the tests to one of your clients to run, and the hospital was like, what is this?
Yeah, they had no idea.
I had to go through Lancet to find out. Lancet can do most, but they have different packs, and you have to bulk packs together. So you got to do like a health and wellness pack. It does your lipids, and then you got to bolt on your men's sex pack. And that's why the cost gets up to $500. Because each pack's got like $100, $100.
No, these guys had no idea. Like serious. Like, what the hell is that? Like, who the hell gave you this? What does it do?
So it's
wow.
It should just be. And again, like, I've had a few clients who I think I told you, Tarryn, like, I've been diagnosed with PCOS, and just had like their LH tested, and you're like, and you're basing that off one thing. It's
not thorough at all.
There's a long way to go. But so if you have listened and you have done your blood work, you can have a consultation with Tarryn. And all her information will be in the show notes, so you can contact her. But you will need your blood work for that.
Well, the list is there.
And the list will be there for you to do. And if I have a successful meeting with this company, that will definitely be on the social media. But yeah, thank you so much, Tarryn, for coming on again. So interesting. I was just thinking birth control would be just another whole entire podcast to talk about, as would PCOS.
It lights a fire in my soul, let me tell you.
And I think it's so needed. Like I did a poll the other day on my Instagram, and like so many women were on it, but they said like the majority of them weren't told why, you know, and had been on it for 10 plus years, and just, you know, all the horror stories that come out when you do polls sometimes. And it was just like, wow, there's yeah, maybe we'll have to, yeah, that will be another episode. But yeah, thanks for taking the time out to talk to us. This was really interesting. And I don't know, any final words?
I guess, trying to think, because I know we talked about a lot of things here, but I would just say that, you know, if you're experiencing like some negative symptoms, you know, don't sit there and suffer. You know, don't, like, I like to refer to women as like the silent sufferers, you know, because like kind of reflecting back to what, you know, we were saying about like the menstrual cycle, and some females just have it horribly, you know, if those like negative signs and symptoms that, you know, I went over, that's your body's way of telling you something. You need to listen to it. You know, don't ignore it, or don't be like, oh, well, I'm a woman, that's just how, you know, I'm getting older, that's just how it is. It's like, no, it's not how it is. Everyone deserves to live, you know, a healthy, you know, healthy quality life, and you're in control of your health. And I just, you need to know what to look for, number one, and you need to know like what resources or who's out there that can help you navigate. I think that's the biggest thing. So listen to your body, don't ignore it.
Yeah, no, I love that.
100%.
Gentlemen?
Nothing much to say. More,
No.
I guess just more conversations among men and their daughters and
So
their
you don't go down the aisle of death.
I think like more male coaches need to feel more comfortable about asking female clients about menstrual cycles.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, I guess times are changing now. And I mean, Andy has a daughter, so yeah, I just it's always fun because when I meet with my pops, we always remind him that, and we laugh about it now. But
I always say to Kat, I don't want to know about lots of stuff, but tell me about if you start your period. I'm okay with that. Don't get screwed. Just don't want to know about boyfriends and stuff. Like, keep things to yourself, we'll be alright.
yeah.
Yeah, more conversations. I like it. We will have many more.
Yep. Definitely.
And on that note, we will see you in the next episode.